"Do not make him leave." The words were barely louder than a breath, but they struck the room harder than any shout could have. Olivia Bennett froze beside the marble staircase of her foundation's private reception hall. Conversation stopped. A champagne glass remained suspended halfway to someone's lips. Across the room, 9-year-old Sophie Bennett stood beside a tall man in a faded gray maintenance shirt, one hand wrapped around the edge of his toolbox. Ethan Carter did not move. He did not smile. He did not even look surprised. Olivia did enough reacting for both of them. "Sophie," her voice cracked. The girl immediately lowered her eyes. "Sweetheart, say that again." Sophie stepped closer to Ethan. Olivia took one step forward. "Please, just say it again." Ethan finally looked at her. "Do not ask her twice." The sentence was calm. Too calm for a man wearing a name badge that said facilities. Olivia's expression hardened. "Excuse me. She already gave you something." Ethan's voice stayed low. "Let it belong to her." A board member near the staircase whispered, "Who does he think he is?" Another man answered, "Maintenance." Ethan heard both of them. He said nothing. That silence irritated Olivia more than an argument would have. She had spent 3 years hiring specialists, speech therapists, behavioral consultants, private tutors, and counselors. 3 years of watching Sophie refuse words until doctors stopped calling it a phase. And now her daughter had spoken to a stranger in work boots. "Mr. Carter," Olivia said, controlled and cold, "you were told not to interfere with my daughter's care." Ethan nodded once. "I did not. She is standing beside you. She walked here. She spoke to you. That was her choice." Olivia stared at him. The room smelled faintly of polished wood, coffee, and expensive perfume. Somewhere behind the closed ballroom doors, a string quartet continued playing, unaware that every person in this smaller room had stopped breathing. Sophie reached into Ethan's open toolbox and touched a folded yellow notepad resting beside a wrench. Ethan lowered his gaze. "You want it?" Sophie nodded. He handed it to her without asking for words. She wrote slowly, pressing the pencil hard enough to leave marks on the next page. "He did not make me talk." Olivia read the sentence from several feet away. Her face changed, but only slightly. "Then why did she?" Ethan looked at Sophie before answering. "Maybe because nobody asked her to." The board member gave a quiet laugh. "That is ridiculous." Ethan turned his head just enough to acknowledge him. "Could be. No anger. No ego. Just restraint." It made the laugh die quickly. Olivia stepped closer. "You are a maintenance technician. You repair lights and doors." "Yes, ma'am." "You are not trained for this." Ethan's eyes shifted toward Sophie. "Not for this." Something in the way he said it caught Olivia's attention. "Not for this. Not untrained." Sophie looked up at him and tapped twice against the metal latch of his toolbox. Ethan answered with 2 taps, then 1. Sophie copied him. Olivia watched. "What is that?" "Nothing important." "It is important if my daughter responds to it." Ethan closed the toolbox gently. Rhythm helps some people feel less watched. Olivia narrowed her eyes. "Where did you learn that?" For the first time, Ethan's expression changed. Not fear. Memory. A door opening half an inch, then closing again. "A long time ago. Doing maintenance." He looked directly at her. "No." The answer landed differently. Sophie took Ethan's sleeve between 2 fingers. He looked down immediately. She wrote another sentence. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Ethan read it, then glanced at Olivia. He could have used the moment. He could have made himself important. Instead, he wrote beneath Sophie's question, "Only if your mother says yes." Sophie turned the notepad toward Olivia. Every eye in the room followed it. Olivia had power over companies, contracts, buildings, and people who never told her no. But in that moment, the only decision that mattered belonged to a little girl who had spent years choosing silence. Olivia looked at Ethan again. "Tomorrow," she said. 10 minutes. With her therapist present. Ethan nodded. "That is fair." Sophie smiled. Small. Almost invisible. Then a silver-haired guest near the doorway stared at Ethan's face with sudden recognition. He took one slow step forward. "Carter." Ethan's shoulders tightened. The man looked at the old faded tattoo just visible beneath Ethan's rolled sleeve. "Chief Carter." Olivia turned sharply. Ethan lowered his sleeve. "Not here, sir." The silver-haired man stopped. Sophie looked between them. Olivia did too. And in a room full of people who thought they had finally witnessed Sophie's secret, another secret had just begun to surface. The next afternoon, Sophie arrived 10 minutes early. Ethan was already in the small family therapy room near the east wing, kneeling beside a loose cabinet hinge with a screwdriver in one hand. Her therapist, Dr. Rachel Monroe, sat at the table with a yellow legal pad and a cup of coffee. Olivia stood near the window, arms folded, watching everything. Sophie stopped in the doorway. Ethan looked up. He did not say hello. He simply tapped the side of his toolbox twice. Sophie answered with 2 taps against the doorframe. Rachel noticed. Olivia noticed too. What does that mean? Olivia asked. Ethan returned to the hinge. Nothing official. Then why does she answer? Because she knows I will not ask for more. Olivia's jaw tightened. Rachel raised one hand gently. Let us see what happens. Sophie entered and sat across from Ethan's toolbox instead of beside her mother. Ethan finished tightening the hinge, closed the cabinet, and moved his tools out of the way. He placed the yellow notepad on the table and wrote one sentence. Do you want quiet today? Sophie read it. Then she circled yes. Ethan nodded. No disappointment. No praise. No attempt to turn the answer into progress. For the next several minutes, he and Sophie did almost nothing. She drew a crooked house. He drew a terrible dog beside it. Sophie looked at the page, then at him, and shook her head. Ethan wrote, That bad? Sophie nodded. Rachel smiled. Olivia did not. This is therapy? She asked. Rachel looked at her. No. This is 10 minutes of a child not being evaluated. Olivia glanced at Sophie. The words landed harder than Rachel intended. Ethan added ears to the dog. Sophie crossed them out. He added a tail that was far too long. Sophie finally smiled. Olivia's expression softened for half a second. Then she caught herself. Mr. Carter, I need to understand something. Ethan looked up. Yes, ma'am. Why are you comfortable with silence? He leaned back slightly. Most people are uncomfortable because they think silence means nothing is happening. And you do not. No, Rachel watched him carefully. Why? Ethan's eyes moved towards Sophie before he answered. Because sometimes silence is the safest answer a person has. Olivia went still. Sophie stopped drawing. Ethan immediately noticed. He looked at the notepad and wrote, You do not have to explain anything. Sophie read it and relaxed. Olivia saw the change. You have done this before. Ethan shook his head. Not like this, but something like it. He was quiet. Rachel did not push. Olivia did. Yesterday someone called you chief. Ethan closed the marker cap. Yesterday was supposed to be about Sophie. You avoided the question. Yes. The honesty irritated her more than an excuse would have. Why? Ethan looked directly at her. Because my past is not a credential for your daughter. Olivia stared at him. That is convenient. It is also true. The room became still. Sophie looked from one adult to the other. Olivia took a breath. I have spent 3 years trying to help her. Ethan nodded. I believe you. Do you? Yes. Then why do I feel like you think I have done everything wrong? Ethan's face softened. I do not. You keep telling me not to ask, not to repeat, not to push. Because she watches what happens after she says no. Olivia stopped. Rachel looked down at the table. Sophie's pencil went still in her hand. Ethan continued carefully. If no always becomes another question, then no stops feeling real. Olivia looked at her daughter. She remembered appointments where Sophie had shaken her head and Olivia had begged for one more try. One more word. One more session. One more specialist. Always one more. I was trying to help, she whispered. I know. Ethan's voice carried no accusation. Sometimes love gets scared and starts holding too tight. Olivia looked back at him. You say that like you know. Ethan's expression changed again. The same guarded distance she had seen the night before. I am a single father. That is not what I meant. It is enough for today. Before Olivia could answer, Sophie pushed the notepad toward Ethan. She had written a question. Do you have a kid? Ethan read it and smiled. He wrote, Daughter. 13. Sophie added, Does she talk a lot? Ethan laughed quietly. More than enough. Sophie watched his face. Then, without looking at Olivia, she whispered, What is her name? Rachel froze. Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. Ethan did not react quickly. He did not reward the moment with surprise. He only answered in the same calm voice he had used all afternoon. Hannah. Sophie nodded once and returned to her drawing. Olivia's eyes filled instantly. Ethan looked at her and gave the smallest shake of his head. Do not turn this into a performance. Olivia understood. She lowered her hand. She did not ask Sophie to repeat it. She did not move closer. She simply sat down. And for the first time in 3 years, Olivia Bennett allowed one precious sentence to exist without demanding another. Over the next several days, Sophie began showing up at the East Wing at almost the same time every afternoon. Ethan never called it a routine. He knew better than to name something fragile too quickly. Sometimes she sat with him while he replaced cabinet latches or tightened loose handles. Sometimes she brought the yellow notepad and drew without speaking. Sometimes she only watched. Olivia watched too. At first, from the doorway, then from farther down the hall. Rachel noticed the change before either of them admitted it. "You are giving her more space," she told Olivia quietly. Olivia kept her eyes on Sophie. "I am trying. That matters. It feels like doing nothing." Rachel smiled. "For someone used to controlling outcomes, that probably feels terrifying." Olivia almost laughed. "You have no idea." Across the room, Sophie wrote something and pushed the pad toward Ethan. He read it. "Do you ever get scared?" His expression shifted. He wrote back, "Yes." Sophie frowned. She added another question. "Even when people need you?" Ethan looked at the words for several seconds. Then he wrote, "Especially then." Sophie studied him. She pointed toward his sleeve, where the faded edge of an old military tattoo was barely visible. Ethan lowered his arm. "That is not important." Sophie tapped the page. "Why, Chief?" Ethan glanced toward Olivia. She had heard. He could tell from the way her posture changed. "That was a long time ago." Sophie waited. Ethan finally wrote, "Navy." Sophie's eyes widened. She pointed at him, then wrote, "Soldier?" Ethan shook his head. "Sailor." Olivia stepped closer. "Special operations?" Ethan looked at her. "You have been asking around." "I asked one person. That is still asking around." "Someone recognized you in my building." Ethan nodded. "And I told him not here." Olivia crossed her arms. "Why hide it?" Ethan closed the notepad. "Because people treat you differently when they know. Maybe they should." "That is exactly why." Sophie looked between them. Olivia took a breath. "You expect me not to be curious?" "Curiosity is fine. And questions? Depends who pays for the answer." Olivia went silent. Ethan's voice stayed even. Sophie should not have to watch adults turn everything around her into somebody else's story. Rachel, standing near the doorway, looked at Olivia. That landed. Again. Olivia had built an entire foundation around helping children, yet every major event somehow centered donors, specialists, public success, measurable outcomes. Sophie had been living in the middle of all that attention. "I never meant to do that," Olivia said. Ethan nodded. "I know. You always say that. Because intent matters. But impact matters too." The room went quiet. Sophie reached for the notepad again and wrote slowly. "Did Navy teach you quiet?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Some of it." She waited. He added beneath the question, "Hannah taught me more." Sophie looked curious. Ethan continued writing. "After her mother died, Hannah stopped talking to me about how she felt. I kept trying to fix it. Schedules, counseling, activities, goals. I thought being useful was the same as being present." Sophie read every word. Olivia did too. Her face softened. "What changed?" Ethan did not look at her. "One night Hannah told me she did not need a plan. She needed her dad." Olivia's eyes dropped. Sophie wrote, "Did you listen?" Ethan nodded. "Eventually." Sophie underlined the word. Rachel smiled. "Eventually is honest." Ethan leaned back. "Honest is easier to maintain." Olivia looked at Sophie. "Is that why you like talking to him?" Sophie froze. Olivia saw it instantly. The old mistake. The question that turned a moment into pressure. She lifted one hand. "You do not have to answer." Sophie stared at her mother, surprised. Olivia sat down several feet away. "I mean it." Sophie watched her for a long moment. Then she wrote something and turned the pad toward Olivia. "Because he waits." Olivia read the sentence. Her throat tightened. She nodded once. "I can learn that." Sophie studied her face. Ethan stayed silent. Nobody rescued the moment. Nobody decorated it. That was what made it real. A few minutes later, a staff member appeared at the door and handed Olivia an envelope. This came from Admiral Mercer. Ethan's head lifted immediately. Olivia opened it. Inside was a formal invitation to a veteran's family event and a handwritten note addressed to Ethan. Olivia did not read it aloud. She simply held it out to him. Ethan took it, but did not open it. Sophie tapped the notepad. "Go." Ethan looked at the envelope. Then at Sophie. "Probably not." She wrote another word. "Why?" Ethan looked toward the window, where late afternoon light stretched across the floor. Because some doors are easier to keep closed. Sophie read that. Then she wrote one final sentence and slid the pad toward him. Closed doors still have rooms behind them. Ethan stared at the words. Olivia did too. And for the first time, neither adult had an answer for the child who had once been known only for her silence. The invitation from Admiral Mercer stayed unopened in Ethan's locker until Friday afternoon. He had spent 3 days pretending it was just another envelope, another piece of paper that could wait. Sophie did not let him forget it. She never asked again. She simply looked at the locker once whenever she came into the East Wing, then went back to her notepad. That silence bothered him more than pressure would have. Olivia noticed. "She is learning from you," she said one afternoon. Ethan tightened a loose screw on a cabinet door. "That sounds dangerous." "She waits now. Waiting is not weakness." "I know." He looked up at her. "You are getting better at that." Olivia folded her arms. "Do not sound surprised. I am trying not to." She almost smiled, but Sophie entered before the moment could become anything else. Rachel followed with a folder under one arm. "Short session today," she said. "No goals beyond comfort." Sophie sat at the table and immediately wrote something. Ethan read it. "Open it." He knew what she meant. "That is between me and the Admiral." Sophie wrote again. "Then decide." Ethan stared at the page. Olivia said nothing. Rachel said nothing. Nobody rescued him. Finally, he crossed the hall, opened his locker, and pulled out the envelope. Inside was a simple invitation to a veteran's family gathering the following weekend and one handwritten line. "You do not owe the past your silence forever." Ethan read it twice. His face changed. Sophie watched. "You planning to go?" Olivia asked. "No." Sophie tapped the table once. Ethan looked at her. She wrote, "Is that your choice or your fear?" Rachel lowered her eyes to hide a smile. Olivia did not. "She definitely learned that from you." Ethan exhaled through his nose. "Apparently." Sophie waited. He folded the note and put it in his pocket instead of returning it to the locker. That was all she needed. The rest of the session passed quietly until Olivia's phone buzzed. Her assistant had sent an update about an upcoming foundation gala. Olivia read it, then glanced toward Sophie. "They want you there for the opening." Sophie's shoulders tightened immediately. Ethan saw it before Olivia finished the sentence. Olivia stopped. Old instincts told her to explain, reassure, persuade. She swallowed them. "You do not have to go." Sophie looked up, surprised. Olivia continued. "Not for donors. Not for me. Not for anyone." Sophie studied her mother for several seconds, then wrote, "Maybe 10 minutes." Olivia nodded. 10 minutes. Sophie added, "If Ethan is there." Ethan looked at her. "That is not fair." Sophie frowned. "Because you are making my attendance part of yours." He took the pen and wrote, "You should be able to choose without needing me as a condition." Sophie read it, then looked angry. She pushed the pad back. "I feel safer if you are there." Ethan's expression softened. "That is different." Olivia watched closely. "So you will come?" "If she wants support, yes." "And if she changes her mind?" "Then she changes her mind." Sophie nodded. Olivia's phone buzzed again. This time she ignored it. Later, after Rachel left, Olivia found Ethan alone in the hallway replacing his ceiling panel. "You know what scares me?" she asked. He looked down from the ladder. "Probably several things. That she trusts you more than me." Ethan climbed down slowly. "She trusts you differently." That sounds like something people say when they're trying to be kind. "I am not." Olivia looked at him. "Then explain." Ethan set the ladder aside. "You are her mother. That means your fear carries more weight. Your hope carries more weight too. Every question from you can feel bigger." Olivia's eyes dropped. "So I should say less." "Sometimes." "And do less." "Sometimes." "That feels like failing." Ethan shook his head. "Restraint is not failure." Olivia looked toward the therapy room where Sophie had left the yellow notepad on the table. "You learned that in the Navy?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Partly. Hostage communication?" His eyes sharpened. "Who told you that?" "Mercer said you worked in situations where getting people calm mattered more than getting them loud." Ethan looked away. "That is a generous version." Olivia did not press. "Does it help with Sophie?" He answered immediately. "She is not a hostage situation." "I know." "Then do not compare her to one." Olivia nodded. "You are right." Ethan's tone softened. "What helps is knowing that frightened people need choices they can believe are real." Olivia absorbed that. "And if they do not trust you?" "You wait." "How long?" Ethan looked towards Sophie's empty chair. as long as dignity requires. The next day, Sophie arrived carrying the yellow notepad and a small paper bag. She handed the bag to Ethan. Inside was a navy blue tie. Ethan stared at it. Sophie wrote, "For the gala." He almost laughed. "I own a tie." She wrote beneath it. "Probably ugly." Olivia covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. Ethan looked at both of them. "This is becoming disrespectful." Sophie's smile widened. Then, so quietly that even Rachel almost missed it, she said, "Wear this one." The room stopped. Olivia's eyes filled instantly. She did not move. Ethan looked at Sophie, then at the tie in his hands. "All right," he said softly. "This one." And this time, nobody asked her to say anything else. The navy blue tie stayed draped over Ethan's kitchen chair until Saturday evening. Hannah noticed it before he could hide it. "That is new." Ethan adjusted the knot in the hallway mirror. "Apparently my old one was unacceptable." Hannah leaned against the wall. "Who said that?" "A 9-year-old. "Then she is probably right." Ethan looked at his daughter. "You are enjoying this too much. I rarely get to see you nervous." "I am not nervous." Hannah smiled. "Sure." The gala was already glowing when Ethan arrived at the Bennett Foundation. Warm lights reflected off polished floors. Donors filled the ballroom in dark suits and evening dresses. A string quartet played near the far wall. Ethan stopped just inside the entrance, immediately uncomfortable with how many people turned to look at him. The tie felt tighter than it had at home. Then Sophie saw him. She was standing beside Olivia, near a quiet corner away from the crowd. Her shoulders relaxed. Ethan noticed that before anything else. He crossed the room slowly. 10 minutes, Olivia said. "That is still the plan." Ethan nodded. "Good." Sophie looked at his tie and smiled. Ethan touched it. Apparently somebody has strong opinions. She wrote on her notepad, "Better." Olivia laughed softly. For several minutes, things remained calm. Sophie stayed close to her mother. Ethan stood a few feet away. Nobody asked her to speak. Nobody introduced her as an inspiration. Then one of the foundation board members approached with 2 donors. "Olivia, there you are." "We were hoping Sophie might come up for the opening remarks." Olivia's expression changed. "That was not agreed." "Only for a moment." "No," the man lowered his voice. "People came because they care about the work. Seeing her would mean something." Sophie heard enough. Her hand tightened around the notepad. Ethan saw it immediately. Olivia stepped between Sophie and the board member. "She is not part of the program." "Olivia, this is a fundraising night." "She is my daughter, not a fundraising tool." The man looked surprised. A few nearby conversations quieted. "I did not mean it that way." "Then do not ask again." Ethan said nothing. He did not need to. Olivia had done something she had struggled to do for years. She had protected Sophie without speaking over her. The board member stepped away. Sophie looked up at her mother. Olivia crouched slightly so they were eye level. "Do you want to leave?" Sophie looked around the room. Then at Ethan. Then she wrote, 5 more minutes." Olivia nodded. 5. Ethan felt someone stop beside him. "That tie is an improvement." He turned. Admiral Mercer stood there in a dark suit, smiling. "Sir, you came?" Sophie asked. Mercer looked toward the girl. "Of course." Olivia straightened. "Admiral." Mercer nodded politely. "Ms. Bennett." She glanced at Ethan. "I still know almost nothing about what he did." Mercer looked amused. "That sounds like him." Ethan's expression hardened slightly. "Sir." Mercer understood the warning but did not completely retreat. He spent years in naval special warfare. More importantly, he was very good at staying calm when everyone else forgot how. Olivia looked at Ethan differently. "That is all." Mercer smiled. "That is all he will let me say." Sophie had been watching. She opened her notepad and wrote, "Were you scared there too?" Ethan read it. "Sometimes." She wrote, "Did you wait?" "A lot." Another line. "For people?" Ethan nodded. "For people. For information. For the right moment." Olivia absorbed the answer. Before she could speak, the board member returned, now accompanied by the event coordinator. "Olivia, we need to start. At least let Sophie stand beside you on stage." Olivia turned toward her daughter. She did not answer for her. "Sophie." Sophie looked toward the stage, then toward the crowd. Her breathing changed. Ethan noticed. Olivia noticed too. "You can say no." The event coordinator smiled too brightly. "Nobody is forcing anything." Sophie stared at him. Then she took one step backward and reached for Ethan's sleeve. The coordinator looked at Ethan. "Maybe you should give them some space." Ethan did not move. "That is her decision. You work here. Yes. Then act like it. The insult landed in the small silence between them. Ethan's face remained calm. Olivia's did not. He is acting exactly like someone who understands my daughter. The coordinator stopped. Sophie's grip tightened. Ethan looked down at her. Do you want me to go? She shook her head. Do you want to leave? Another shake. Do you want quiet? Sophie nodded. Ethan turned toward Olivia. Can we use the side room? Olivia answered immediately. Yes. The coordinator began. But the program. Olivia cut him off. The program can wait. They moved toward the smaller reception room beside the ballroom. Mercer stayed behind. Rachel joined them at the doorway. Inside, the music became only a distant vibration through the wall. Sophie sat down. Ethan remained near the door. Olivia sat across from her. Nobody spoke for almost a minute. Then Sophie looked at her mother. Her lips parted. Olivia did not lean forward. She did not ask. She waited. Sophie whispered, "You said no for me." Olivia's eyes filled. "I did." Sophie swallowed. "Thank you." Olivia closed her eyes for half a second, then opened them. "You are welcome." Ethan looked away toward the door, giving them privacy. Sophie noticed. "Ethan." He turned. She pointed toward the chair beside them. "Stay." Ethan slowly sat down. And outside that quiet room, hundreds of people were waiting for a gala to begin, unaware that the most important thing happening in the building had nothing to do with speeches, money, or applause. The gala continued without Sophie. Olivia returned to the ballroom alone and gave the opening remarks herself. She did not mention why her daughter was absent. She did not turn the moment into a lesson for donors. She simply spoke about dignity, access, and the difference between helping someone and deciding for them. In the side room, Sophie sat with Ethan and Rachel while the music came through the wall as a soft vibration. Ethan did not fill the silence. He had learned long ago that people often reveal more when nobody rushes them. Sophie drew a small square on the notepad, then another beside it. Ethan pointed. "Rooms." She nodded. Then she drew a door between them. Ethan watched. Sophie wrote, "Mom used to stand in the other room." Rachel looked at her carefully. Ethan did not ask what she meant. Sophie kept writing. "When I stopped talking, everyone came closer. Doctors, teachers, Mom. Questions all day." She drew several circles around one square until the page looked crowded. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Olivia had not abandoned her daughter. She had done the opposite. She had surrounded her with help until there was almost nowhere left for Sophie to breathe. Rachel leaned forward. "Do you want your mother to see this?" Sophie hesitated. Then she nodded. Ethan stood. "I will get her." Sophie caught his sleeve. "No." The word was quiet, but clear. Ethan stopped immediately. Sophie looked toward the door. "I want to." Rachel smiled. "Then we wait." 10 minutes later, Olivia returned. She had removed her heels and carried them in one hand, looking less like a billionaire than a tired mother at the end of a long day. "How are we doing?" Sophie pushed the notepad across the table. Olivia read the page. Her face changed slowly. She sat down without speaking. Sophie pointed to the crowded square. Olivia swallowed. "That was you." Sophie nodded. Then she pointed to the circles. "All of us." Another nod. Olivia closed her eyes. "I thought if I found the right person, the right treatment, the right school, the right plan, you would feel safe again." Sophie wrote. It felt loud even when nobody talked. Olivia stared at the sentence. Ethan looked down. Rachel remained still. There are truths that do not need explanation. They only need enough quiet to land. Olivia reached toward Sophie, then stopped herself halfway. "Can I hold your hand?" Sophie looked at her mother's open palm and placed her hand inside it. Olivia's eyes filled. "I am sorry." Sophie did not speak. Olivia continued. "Not because I try to help you. I will never be sorry for loving you. But I am sorry I kept making my fear your responsibility." Sophie squeezed her hand. Ethan turned slightly toward the door. This belonged to them. Olivia noticed. "You do that every time something gets personal." Ethan looked back. "Do what?" "Move toward the exit." Rachel looked at him now too. Sophie wrote, "She is right." Ethan gave the page a tired look. "I am being surrounded." Olivia almost smiled. "Apparently." Sophie wrote another question. "Why do you leave?" Ethan's expression changed. "Because staying can make people think they need you." Sophie shook her head and wrote, "Or want you." The room went quiet. Ethan stared at the words. Olivia did not rescue him from them. "Hannah used to wait by the front window when I came home," he said finally, "after her mother died. I started volunteering for every extra shift I could take. Olivia frowned. Why? Work was simple. Broken things had answers. And grief did not. No, Ethan rubbed one hand across his jaw. One night Hannah asked if I was staying late because I did not want to come home. Sophie watched him closely. What did you say? Olivia asked. I told her I was providing for us. Was that true? Ethan looked at the floor. Partly. He took a breath. The rest was fear. Sophie reached for the notepad. Same room. Ethan read the words and understood immediately. Different doors. Same room. His fear had looked like distance. Olivia's fear had looked like control. Both had been trying to protect themselves from helplessness. Rachel broke the silence gently. That is why this matters. Not because Sophie spoke tonight. Because all three of you are beginning to recognize what fear does when nobody names it. Olivia looked at Ethan. Did the Navy teach you that? No, then who did? Ethan looked at Sophie. Children are efficient teachers. Sophie smiled. Olivia leaned back and studied him. You never answered Mercer's invitation. Ethan touched the folded envelope still inside his jacket. No, Sophie pointed toward it. Ethan sighed. You are persistent. She wrote, choice, not pressure. Ethan looked at Olivia. She raised both hands. I'm staying out of this one. He pulled out the invitation and unfolded it. The veterans' family gathering was the following Saturday. He had read the date enough times to know it without looking. Hannah might want to go. Sophie wrote, ask her. Ethan nodded slowly. I will. Olivia watched him put the invitation back into his pocket instead of throwing it away. It was a small movement. Almost nothing. But Sophie noticed. She always noticed. On the drive home that night, Olivia did not ask her daughter how many words she had spoken. She did not ask whether she felt better. At a red light, she simply said, thank you for showing me the drawing. Sophie looked out the window for a moment. Then she turned toward her mother. You stayed. Olivia gripped the steering wheel, fighting tears. Yes. Sophie nodded. Good. And for the first time in years, Olivia understood that healing was not measured by how much silence disappeared. Sometimes it was measured by who remained when the silence returned. The following Saturday, Ethan stood outside the veterans' family gathering with Hannah beside him and the folded invitation still in his jacket pocket. The building was smaller than Olivia had expected when Sophie insisted they drive over later that afternoon. No marble staircase. No photographers. No polished speeches. Just long tables, paper cups of coffee, framed photographs, and families talking beneath soft fluorescent lights. Hannah looked at her father. You can still leave. Ethan glanced at the door. Do you want to? No, then we stay. She smiled. Good. Inside, Admiral Mercer spotted them almost immediately. Chief Carter. Ethan gave him a tired look. You really enjoy saying that. More than you enjoy hearing it. Mercer shook Hannah's hand first. You must be the reason he came. Hannah grinned. Mostly. Ethan looked betrayed. I asked. After a 9-year-old told you to. Mercer laughed. For the first 20 minutes, Ethan stayed near the edge of the room. He listened to other veterans talk about jobs, children, marriages, ordinary disappointments, and the strange difficulty of becoming ordinary again after years of being trained for extraordinary situations. Nobody asked Ethan for stories. Nobody demanded proof. That helped. Then Mercer introduced him to a former medic whose son had struggled after losing his mother. The man said, hardest thing I ever did was learn that my kid did not need me to be impressive. Ethan looked at him. What did he need? Available. One word. Ethan felt it settle somewhere deep. Across town, Sophie sat in Olivia's car holding the yellow notepad. Olivia had asked twice whether she really wanted to come. The second time, Sophie had simply looked at her. Olivia caught herself. Right. One question. Sophie smiled. When they arrived, Ethan saw them through the glass doors. His first reaction was surprise. His second was concern. Is she okay here? Olivia nodded. She chose it. Sophie walked inside and immediately found Hannah. The two girls moved to a quieter corner with markers and paper. Olivia stayed beside Ethan. You look uncomfortable. I am. And you stayed. Ethan glanced at Sophie. Apparently, that is becoming a theme. Mercer joined them. Olivia Bennett. She shook his hand. Admiral. Mercer looked at Ethan. Has he told you anything useful yet? Only enough to make me more curious. Ethan sighed. Sir. Mercer smiled but softened. He served with Naval Special Warfare and later helped train teams in crisis communication. He was good at reading rooms before people understood what the room was saying. Olivia looked at Ethan. That sounds familiar. Ethan said nothing. Mercer continued. His best skill was never force. It was restraint. Ethan's eyes lowered. That is enough. Mercer nodded. It is. Olivia respected the boundary. Minutes later, Sophie approached carrying the notepad. She wrote something and held it toward Mercer. Did he save people? Mercer read it, then looked at Ethan before answering. Sometimes. Sophie added another question. How? Mercer smiled faintly. Often by getting everyone to slow down long enough to make a better choice. Sophie looked at Ethan. He appeared almost embarrassed. That does not sound very heroic, he said. Sophie wrote, maybe quiet hero. Hannah read it over her shoulder and laughed. Ethan shook his head. Absolutely not. Even Olivia smiled. Later, the gathering organizer invited anyone who wanted to share a short reflection. Ethan immediately looked toward the exit. Hannah saw it. Sophie saw it too. Neither said anything. That was worse. After 3 other people spoke, Ethan stood. The room quieted. He did not walk to the front. He simply remained beside his chair. I used to think being useful was the same as being present, he said. I was wrong. Hannah looked down. Ethan continued. After my wife died, I tried to solve grief with schedules, work, and discipline. My daughter needed something simpler. He looked at Hannah. She needed me to stay. Hannah's eyes filled. Ethan's voice remained steady. I am still learning that. He sat down. No applause came immediately. Mercer had asked everyone beforehand to let silence exist when it needed to. Hannah reached for Ethan's hand. He let her. Olivia watched, understanding more about him in 30 seconds than she had learned from every question she had asked. Sophie moved closer and placed the yellow notepad on Ethan's knee. On it she had written, "You stayed today." Ethan picked up the pen and wrote beneath it. So did you? Sophie read the words. Then she looked across the room at Olivia. Her mother was not hovering, not signaling, not waiting for a performance. Just there. Sophie walked to her. Olivia opened one hand, but did not reach first. Sophie took it. Then, in a voice small enough that only the people nearest them heard, she said, "Mom, I think I want to come back next time." Olivia froze for half a heartbeat. Then she smiled. "Whenever you choose." Sophie nodded. Ethan watched from across the room. Mercer leaned toward him. You know what changed her? Ethan shook his head. Not me. Mercer followed Ethan's gaze toward Olivia and Sophie. Exactly. And in that ordinary room, surrounded by people who understood that courage rarely looks the way stories promise, Ethan finally realized the same truth applied to him. Healing was not returning to the man he had been. It was learning that the man he was now deserved to stay. The week after the veterans' gathering, something changed in the way Sophie entered the foundation. She no longer paused at the east wing doorway waiting to see whether Ethan was there. She still looked for him, but she did not need him to make the room feel safe anymore. Ethan noticed that before anyone said it. One afternoon, he was replacing a damaged floor strip near the therapy room when Sophie walked past him with Olivia and Rachel. She stopped, waved, then kept going. Ethan smiled to himself. Olivia saw it. That should make you happy. It does. You look sad. Both can be true. Olivia studied him. Because she needs you less? Ethan shook his head. Because she is trusting herself more. Olivia looked through the glass where Sophie was already sitting at the table with Rachel. That scares me. Why? Because trusting herself means she might choose things I cannot protect her from. Ethan set down his tool. That is what growing up does. Olivia gave him a tired smile. Hannah prepared you for this. Hannah is still preparing me. Inside the room, Sophie wrote something and held it against the glass. Mom only. Olivia froze. Ethan glanced at her. Looks like you have been invited. Olivia entered alone. Sophie had drawn 2 chairs facing each other with a small space between them. Olivia sat in one. Rachel moved to the far corner. Sophie looked at her mother for nearly a minute. Olivia resisted every instinct to ask what was wrong. Finally, Sophie whispered, "Why were you scared when I stopped talking?" Olivia's face softened. Because I thought I was losing you. Sophie looked down. I was still there. I know that now. Did you think I was broken? Olivia's breath caught. No, Sophie looked up. Olivia corrected herself. I think I acted like something had to be fixed. That was different, but I understand why it may have felt the same. Sophie nodded slowly. I hated when people whispered around me. I am sorry. I could still hear them. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. I know. Sophie continued. I heard people say trauma. Difficult. withdrawn, fragile. Olivia's hands tightened in her lap. You should never have had to carry those words. Sophie looked toward the glass. Ethan was kneeling near the hallway floor, deliberately focused on his repair. She turned back to her mother. He never called me anything. Olivia smiled faintly. No, he did not. He just waited. Yes. Sophie took a breath. Can you do that when I do not talk? Olivia's answer came slowly. I can learn. Sophie studied her face. Even if it is a long time. Even then. The room became quiet again. This time Olivia did not fear it. Outside, Ethan finished the floor strip and stood. Rachel stepped into the hallway. She is doing well. Ethan nodded. Looks like it. So are you. That is debatable. Rachel smiled. You stayed at the veterans gathering. Apparently, everyone knows. Hannah told Sophie. Sophie told Olivia. Olivia told nobody, which is progress. Ethan laughed under his breath. Fair. Rachel looked through the glass. You understand that Sophie speaking more is not because of you alone. I know. Good. Her mother is changing. Sophie is choosing. You are doing the clinical work. Rachel nodded. And you created a kind of safety she could recognize. Ethan looked away. I fixed a hinge. You keep doing that. Doing what? Reducing your role until nobody can thank you. Ethan was quiet. Rachel continued. Humility and disappearance are not the same thing. The word stayed with him. Later that evening, Olivia found Ethan near the loading entrance. Rachel says Sophie wants to attend the next Foundation family meeting. Good. She also wants to speak. Ethan looked up sharply. On stage? No. Small room. Families only. Her idea? Completely. Ethan nodded. Then good. Olivia hesitated. She asked me not to tell anyone what she plans to say. Then do not. I am not. You just told me she plans to say something. Olivia stared at him. You are exhausting. Ethan almost smiled. Occupational hazard. She looked at him for a moment. Will you be there? Did she ask? Not yet. Then I will wait. 3 days later, the family meeting filled a modest conference room with parents, children, counselors, and folding chairs. Sophie sat between Olivia and Rachel. Ethan stood at the back near the door after Sophie had personally asked him to come. When Rachel invited anyone who wanted to share, nobody moved at first. Then Sophie stood. Olivia's hand twitched, but she kept it in her lap. Sophie looked at the room. Her breathing was shallow. Ethan did not nod. He did not encourage. He simply stayed. Sophie looked at her mother. When I stopped talking, she said softly. Everybody thought silence was the problem. The room became completely still. Sophie swallowed. It was not. Olivia's eyes filled. Sophie continued. The problem was that nobody knew how to sit with me inside it. She turned toward Ethan at the back of the room. He did. Ethan lowered his eyes. Sophie looked back at Olivia. Then Mom learned. Olivia covered her mouth, but did not interrupt. Sophie took one final breath. I am talking more now. But if I get quiet again, that does not mean I am gone. Olivia nodded through tears. I know. Sophie looked at her. Good. Then she sat down. Nobody applauded. Rachel had asked them not to. The silence that followed was not pity. It was respect. Ethan remained near the door, but this time he did not leave. 3 months later, the Bennett Foundation looked different, even though most of the walls had not changed. The difference was quieter. Family meetings now began with choices instead of expectations. Children could speak, write, draw, sign, or say nothing at all. Staff members had stopped using words like difficult when what they really meant was overwhelmed. Olivia had ordered no new marble, no larger signs, no expensive campaign around the change. She had simply changed the rules. Sophie noticed that more than anyone. One Friday afternoon, Ethan was replacing a worn door closer near the east wing when Sophie walked past with Olivia. She stopped and looked at him. You are still fixing doors. Ethan glanced at the screwdriver in his hand. They keep breaking. You could do something else. I do. Olivia smiled. Ethan had agreed to spend 2 afternoons a week helping Rachel and the family support team think through communication spaces, privacy, and how adults approach children who shut down under pressure. He still refused a new title. Olivia had offered 3. He had rejected all 3. Maintenance is honest, he had said. So is advisor, Olivia had answered. Too many syllables. Sophie had laughed at that. Now she looked at Ethan and asked, Is Hannah coming tonight? She is bringing dessert. Did she make it? Unfortunately. Sophie smiled. Then maybe Mom should bring backup. Olivia looked offended. I can buy excellent dessert. Ethan stood and tested the repaired door. That is not the same as making it. I am surrounded by disrespect. You will survive. The words were light, but the look between them carried something gentler than before. No urgency, no promise, just trust growing without being forced into a name. That evening, Olivia and Sophie came to Ethan's house for dinner. Hannah had made brownies that were slightly overbaked around the edges. Sophie ate too. The kitchen was small compared with anything in Olivia's world, but nobody seemed to notice. A school calendar hung crooked on the refrigerator. Ethan's old Navy photograph sat on a shelf now instead of inside a drawer. Hannah had put it there after the veterans' gathering. He had not moved it. After dinner, the girls disappeared into the living room with markers and a board game. Olivia helped Ethan rinse plates. Mercer called me, she said. Ethan groaned. That sentence never ends well. He says you agreed to help with a veterans' family communication workshop. Ethan shrugged. One Saturday. You said yes. Apparently. Olivia smiled. You are getting better at staying. Ethan looked through the doorway toward Hannah. Trying. Olivia dried a plate slowly. Sophie spoke at school yesterday. Ethan looked at her. Because she wanted to? Yes. Then good. She only said 2 sentences. Still good. Olivia nodded. I did not ask what they were. Ethan turned toward her. That must have hurt. She laughed. More than you know. Then her expression softened. She told me later anyway. Funny how that works. Apparently trust makes people volunteer things. Ethan placed another plate in the rack. Sometimes. Olivia was quiet for a moment. I used to think silence meant I was losing her. And now? Now sometimes it just means she is tired. Or thinking. Or angry. Or peaceful. Ethan nodded. That sounds more human. Exactly. From the living room, Hannah called. Dad, Sophie says your drawing still looks like a deformed dog. Ethan raised his voice. That drawing was misunderstood. Sophie's laugh came first. Then her voice. It was bad. Ethan froze for half a second. Olivia did too. Old habits. Old reflexes. Then Olivia looked at him. Ethan looked back. Neither rushed into the room. Neither asked Sophie to repeat it. They simply smiled and went on drying dishes. A few minutes later, Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway. Mom. Olivia turned. Sophie did not speak immediately. She looked toward Ethan, then back at her mother. The room stayed quiet. Nobody filled it. Finally, Sophie said, Can we stay a little longer? Olivia's eyes softened. Of course. Sophie nodded and started back toward the living room, then stopped. Mom. Yes. Sophie looked directly at her. Thank you for staying when I am quiet. Olivia's face changed. Every apology, every mistake, every desperate appointment seemed to pass behind her eyes at once. But she did not cry in a way that made Sophie responsible for comforting her. She simply said, Always. Sophie smiled and disappeared around the corner. Olivia stood motionless beside the sink. Ethan handed her the dish towel. She took it. You were right, she whispered. About what? The first day? She did not need another person asking her to speak. Ethan looked toward the living room. She needed people who would still be there if she did not. Olivia nodded. And you? Ethan looked at the photograph on the shelf, then at Hannah laughing with Sophie. I think I needed the same thing. Olivia reached across the counter and rested her hand beside his, close enough to offer, not close enough to assume. Ethan looked at it. Then he placed his hand over hers. No applause. No audience. No one waiting for a miracle. Just 2 adults who had finally learned that respect could be quiet, grace could be patient, and second chances did not arrive with noise. From the living room, Sophie called for them both. Olivia and Ethan walked in together. And the little girl once defined by her silence was no longer being measured by how often she spoke. She was simply Sophie. Heard when she used words. Heard when she used paper. Heard when she laughed. And heard, most importantly, when she chose silence.